Welcome everybody. I'm very excited to have Dan Manning back here to both, like we like to lead with value at Gust and also with Dan, also to introduce a new cohort of a program we've had in great success with as kind of a subcomponent of our mission control, which is called Countdown. It's all about getting, Dan, you could probably describe it better than me, but the entire business foundation in place. And then the kind of graduation of this program is about also being pitch ready. So if you are going to raise funds, getting your business foundation in place can actually inform whether you need to or whether you should or what kind of funds you're going to raise from who. But once you've determined you can, and a pitch isn't always for investment, it can also be for finding co-founders, partners, advisors. It's a great way to explain your business. And a lot of founders come to us in our free sessions in our mission control program, and they're like, I just need that great pitch deck. Once I get that great pitch deck, those 10 to 15 slides that investors will love, that's the key to money, millions of dollars for, a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation. And I think Dan will tell you the pitch is a output of a well-crafted story around your business. And the story is almost essential. You can refine a pitch deck all day, but the story building part of it and how those two relate are really the most important parts of telling a compelling business story to pretty much anybody you encounter. So Dan's going to run through kind of a high level, I would call it an overview of what it takes to be pitch ready. And we'll also highlight parts of the program that we're launching in May. And we'll also have probably live time for Q&A in the chat. So feel free to use the chat. It should be open. And without that, Dan, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm looking forward to the session today. So I'm a storyteller. And over the past 4 years, I've worked with thousands of founders to help them to tell the stories that they need to move the idea that is in their brain into someone else's brain. Sometimes it's a customer, sometimes it's an investor, sometimes it's somebody who's joining their team, but story is the way that I do it. About 4 years ago, I had my very first founder customer for my storytelling services. I had retired from the Air Force after spending 25 years in the Air Force. The first half as a fighter pilot, the second half as a military diplomat. I was also a speechwriter during part of that time, and I was teaching a workshop on storytelling. And I had a founder who was in that session, and I had met with him several times before on some things that were not directly related to his business, and he tried to explain his business to me, but honestly, I had no idea exactly what he was doing. But he attended that storytelling workshop, and at the end, he said, Dan, can I just hire you to help me to write my story? Like, yeah, I'll do that. I had never done it before, but sure, I can do that. He said, how much would you charge? I said, $50. He said, okay, let's do it. So we met for an hour. And because I was not just like listening to him talk, but because I was helping him to explain what it was he was doing, I started asking different questions. And he had an idea that he really believed in. But when he went to go pitch to investors, when he finished and he looked around the table, all the faces looking back at him were just blank. They were no evidence that they had any idea about what it was that he was doing or why he was doing it. Their first questions were, so what are you doing? So of course he was raising no money. But we worked together. I helped him to build a story. I delivered it to him. He said, yes, this is exactly what I've been trying to say for a couple of years now. A week later, he texted me back and he said that he used that story for the first time. And not only did they get it, but they also gave him the biggest check that he had ever received. He took that $50 and turned it into $10,000 in a week. I recognized two things at that moment. The first was that I should raise my prices. The second was that if I could develop the system that allows founders to continue to do this, they would be able to move their ideas, but also move people and get the funding that they needed or the support they needed or the customers they needed to continue to grow. So I'm going to talk with you today and show you exactly the approach that I take to building these stories, also help you to understand the type of story that I recommend that people use when they're opening a pitch, the types of stories I absolutely advise against. The chat's open. I'll also share my LinkedIn in the chat as well. So if you want to stay connected with me there, you can. I'm not sure exactly. There we go, everyone.
Whoops, the chat wasn't open.
There we go. Oh, perfect. Right. So I've got the got my LinkedIn there in the chat. And if you reach out to me, if you have questions about your own pitch or want to have a discussion about it or about the program that we are building that will be kicking off next month as well, I'll be glad to work with you there on that. So here we go. Let's get into it. So when you begin your pitch, you're in a race. You're in a race with investors who are trying to figure out what it is that you're talking about. What is the business that you are pitching? Who are you to be pitching this business? And why should I continue listening? And most investors, regardless of how unique you believe your idea is, most investors have heard an idea that is very close to it. And they are very quickly trying to say, what is this person's business? And have I already made a decision about businesses like this? So often, founders will go through most of their pitch, and what they haven't recognized is that the investor doesn't have their idea in mind at all. So when they eventually hear the no, it's a no to a business that they didn't actually pitch. But the investor was just going off of what you were giving them, but you weren't giving them something that helped them to really understand who you serve, why somebody would trade their money for the thing that you're offering, how this is going to be a big business, and why you're the person to do it. The good news is that because stories work differently in our brains, you are able to actually delay their judgment while you share the story. But for that to work, you have to tell actually a no kidding story. So when I talk about story, this is the definition that I use. I'm not the word police. Other people will use different definitions of story, but this is the one that I go back to when I'm teaching in my apprenticeship or when I'm working with clients. A story is a complete narrative about a character who transforms in order to reach a goal. So it's a complete narrative. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The story I told you about my first client, it began with him not being able to explain his business. The middle was when he worked with me. The end, he got the success that he was looking for. So it's a complete narrative. It's about a character. And importantly, it's about one character. I didn't tell you his name. His name was Drew, but I talked about one person, one specific instance as we went through, rather than saying I've worked with thousands of clients and generally they do this and we do this type of thing. I drove it down to the very specifics of one person. And this person had a goal. Drew's goal was to raise money so that he could build the business that he wanted to build. But something stood in the way, and overcoming that obstacle required transformation. Either he needed to transform himself or he needed to create some type of transformation in the world. In this case, the transformation that he created was a change in the way that he presented his business because he worked with me. Now, the stories don't have to be long. You can tell a story in a 5-minute pitch, and your story can be maybe 15 to 30 seconds even of of your pitch. So don't feel like you're giving away a lot of time inside of your pitch. More importantly, if you spend your whole 5 minutes, or maybe you even go over by a couple of minutes, but nobody understands what it is that you're talking about, you wasted your own time and everyone else's as well. It is more valuable for you to have clarity than it is for you to have volume in your pitch. So, Ryan, I haven't shared this one with you. It's a video. It's about 1 minute and 45 seconds long. And when it gets done, I'm going to ask you to tell me what happened here. And everyone in the
Okay.
audience as well. There's no sound involved. It's just going to be played here silently. I want you to think about how you would explain what happened here as well. So here we go. All right. So Ryan, what happened there?
Divorce or a sad story of child abuse.
So actually, I showed this at an
Or sorry,
in-person
spousal abuse.
spousal abuse. Yeah, yeah. So I I showed this to a live in-person session with a bunch of founders there. I asked the group, what did you see here? And on this side, this one guy says, oh, it looks like a child custody dispute. It's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a lawyer. Okay. I go to the other side of the room, ask somebody else, what did you see here? And they said, oh, it looks like a kidnapping in progress. I'm like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm in law enforcement. The point here is that there are only shapes that are moving on the screen. This is actually a video originally produced in the 1940s by two psychologists, Heider and Summel, and they did essentially this, right? They showed the video and then asked people to interpret what was happening there. What virtually every person does is interpret just these random movements, or not random, these movements of shapes on the screen in terms of a story. People will use a story to create clarity when things are ambiguous. So when you are pitching your startup, if you are not clear, every person in your audience is still telling themselves a story. A story is going to be told. Either you are giving them the story or you're allowing them to make it up. And when they make it up, the odds are very high that they're going to make it up in the wrong direction. And it is much harder to change someone's mind than it is to help them to get it right the first time. The way that you get
And
it
I'll
right the
actually
first
add,
time. Yeah, go, please.
oops, sorry. I just said add an anecdote to that because
Yeah.
when you said, and this is me being exactly like an investor looking at a pitch for the first time. When you said a law enforcement person said it's a kidnapping, my mind immediately went to like, you think it's a kidnapping, but the dot moving the door around, that's so clearly a domestic dispute. That can't be a kidnapping. Like that dot would run away. And so, but even if the next slide was like, well, this is my kidnapping story, I'd be like, wait a second. But
Yes.
what about that dot scene? And I'm thinking about that, rather than I'm thinking about, the next thing they're telling me.
Absolutely. There was a pitch practice last year, I remember, and that we were in together that you were leading, and the founder was she was pitching about new wine bottles. And I know that you have a lot of experience, in wine. And one of the things she said in the beginning made people believe that she was talking about in like wine bottles and mini bars, but she was actually talking about them in a different context.
Yep.
And when you went back and you were giving her your feedback, you had over-indexed on the mini bars, even though she had said it later in her presentation, and she had tried to say it yesterday. I had the same issue, myself with someone
Yep.
else. That once that idea gets into our mind, it is really, really hard for us to let go of it. When we think we
Well,
know,
she led with imagine checking into a hotel room after
yeah,
dinner, wanting one glass of wine, going into the minibar, opening it
yeah,
up, and just being disappointed with your selections. I'm like, I mean, that is a story I can completely relate to.
yes.
Tell me more.
Unfortunately, it wasn't the idea that she actually wanted to communicate. And she was counting on her audience being able to take that story and then switch to exactly what it was that she actually wanted to communicate. So the lesson here is like storytelling is not optional in your pitch. Like a story is going to be told, and either you give them the story that you want them to believe, or you leave it to them to make it up for themselves. Now, so why does story become so powerful? And even when people say, oh, it's only 5 minutes, or even it's only 3 minutes, I don't have time to tell a story. In fact, be- when we are processing stories, our brain is processing them faster, right? Stories connect to emotions. And I'm not talking about like happiness and sadness. I'm talking about um, emotions we're going to talk about in a second, about relief and about hope and about excitement for the character, for the customer usually, who is actually using your business to achieve an outcome in their mind. Because Ryan created this story about about abuse, and that story was if you were to tell that story, it would take much longer than it was for the video here to be displayed because our brains process emotional processing at such a faster rate. Typically, founders will want absolutely. I'm glad to hear that, Ryan. Um, Founders will believe that they need to speak in a much more like cognitive way. Like will use sometimes words that are more complicated than we need, and we want to present a much more like logical argument, but it takes more time for your audience to process this logic. Now, eventually we'll get to the logic, but if we start with a very short story, and I'm going to tell you exactly the ones that I recommend using, it helps to sort of frame everything that comes after it. And in that story, we're going to talk about and create these emotions of relief, of hope, and excitement. Ultimately, the decisions that people are making are going to be, emotional decisions, right? We make our decisions with emotions, and then we go back and we justify them with logic. And as we are telling these stories need to have something at stake. If you don't have something at stake, there's no reason for there to be any emotion process there. The story that I go back to over and over and over, the one that I'll tell you is the gold standard story for pitch, opening up a pitch, is a customer success story where some customer had a pain, they struggled to achieve it. All the other things in the world that they could have used weren't working for them. They came, they used your product, and because of your product, they were able to get relief from that pain. Right? It's being a painkiller, not a vitamin. And you're telling the story that shows that you're a painkiller rather than just telling people that you're actually something that's really valuable. So by raising those stakes, we allow some emotion to happen there, and it shows our investors and our audience what it is and why people would pay money for it. But also, stories have this ability to suspend judgment, right? I told you you're in a race, but when you tell a story, people, because of the way that stories process in your brain, they will stop and listen to your story. And for, at least for the story that you're telling, your audience has to assume that the story you're telling is true. That's why we can watch movies about space aliens or time travel or these other things. We suspend our judgment until the end of a story, and then we make that decision. In a pitch, we're only asking our investors, not even asking, we're leading the investors to suspend their judgment for maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that 30 seconds that you spend with an investor is the most important 30 seconds that you will ever spend with them, because you're going to set that frame for what it is you're doing, and everything else that you say is going to follow from that. At the same time, it's important to recognize that stories are literally processed differently in our brain. Our brain has sort of two different networks of the way that they work, different pieces of our brain that are networked together. And in one case, and the one on the left, I call it the fact brain. And this is where we're processing, we're judging, we're using critical thinking, and we're sort of using our decision-making skills on the left. It's slower, it's more methodical. It also takes a lot of attention. So when you're speaking, often we'll see founders that have too many words on the screen, and the words that are on the screen don't match the words coming out of their mouth. You are driving your audience into that left sort of fact processing brain to sort all of that out. But when we have our audience in their story mind, now this is where we are using their imagination, we're allowing their perspective taking, their prospection, where they're imagining like what is going to be the next thing that happens from this. And that's exactly where you want them to be. When I'm speaking to audiences or I'm helping people to design pitches, I want the investors to sit back, relax, let me take you on the ride, and you're going to get to somewhere that is good. If you don't, that's my fault, and I can make sure that you get to that place. But at the same time, the story is not the point, right? The story is the truck that is delivering the cargo. The cargo is your message. Your message is supported by the story, and everything in your pitch should be there to support your message. Your message that you are creating some unique value in the world, that you're going to be able to build a big business out of it, and that you are the person to do it. Like that's the message that we're communicating, and we're using story to do that. So let me pause here for a second. Let me double check in the chat as well. But Ryan, when you were hearing, you hear lots of pitches every week, and when you're hearing pitches, do you see a difference yourself as an investor when you are assessing pitches that are more fact-based versus those that have story elements?
Oh, the first thing you do when you hear a fact is you try to summon your own language and either refute it or agree with it. Or even, I think more disciplined investors try to figure out if it's in an order of magnitude of correctness to what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I see a lot of founders lead their first or second or third slide is just how huge this market is. They'll
Mm-hmm.
throw out a number like $300 billion is spent every year on blank. And then immediately it's like, okay, what is blank? If you say I'm like childhood education, I'm like K through 12. kindergarten.
Mhm.
Where do you cut that off? Like, what, is that too much? Is that too little? How many people would that be? How many is that per, I just start thinking about that. Or the same thing with a solution is it's either solution first or market size first, because
Mhm.
they're trying to like wow you with how intelligent they are or how well researched they are. And those are always, yeah, you stop listening. Just I think you're a couple seconds, right? In terms of,
Mhm.
do I believe childhood education is a $300 billion market? I'm not sure. Because if the rest of this pitch hinges off that being true, I can literally stop paying attention to it if I resoundingly know it's not true. And the more closer I am to uh, the expertise area of the founder, the more likely I am to be dismissive. So I think
Mhm.
you and I both saw the pitch almost a year ago of a real estate group that
Mhm.
wanted to accept crypto as a escrow for home purchasers
Mhm.
directly, so they don't have to transfer and take risks. We had David on the call, an investor who has done tons of research in this area. And so he got, the market sizing and things like that, and he wanted to listen to what they've done. The rest of us on the call were like, do people really want to do this? Like, what's the demand for it? Like,
Mhm.
is this, and it varied because there wasn't really a story up front to be like, who's the customer? What problem are they solving? How can I imagine uh, the realness of that? And yeah, you get hard fast pretty much in terms of your
Mhm.
scrutiny.
Yeah, so when we process facts, the way that humans typically do this is you tell me a fact. The first thing that I try to evaluate is like, does this does this fact matter to me? If it doesn't matter to me, then I'm not going to spend any time thinking about it. But if I think it might matter to me because it's critical for the rest of this pitch, now I'm going to go through some other questions. Does it seem like it's true? And if it is true, like what are the ramifications of that being true? But the person pitching doesn't stop speaking to allow me to do that processing. Like in the way that you were describing, they're already on slide 2, maybe on slide 3. And even though your face is pointed towards the slides, nothing has gone into your brain. So what happens so often is that you get to the end of a pitch and founders feel like, well, I said all the things that I need to say. Well, maybe you did, but none of them actually made it into the brains of the people you're speaking to. The other challenge that you have, especially if you are pitching something to a very particular industry, like real estate, where I see this often with some of the deep science founders that I work with. If you are pitching to people that have that expertise, then honestly, a story is a little bit less important because you know that they're thinking in this industry. You can make a guess that it's relatively aligned with your thinking, and you can immediately start going deeper into details. But you don't always know all the people that are in the room or the level of expertise your audience will have. But when I can start with a story, even just like I did in today's, I know that we have this shared experience of that story. So I can reference back to that story, and I know that you all know what I'm talking about. I don't have to assume that you have some level of expertise because I've given you what you need in this 5 minute pitch for you to be able to hear me. When we get the follow on meeting and we sit down, now we can go deep into details. I'll probably have some other stories that I can tell to illustrate there, but I'm not under a time crunch or a clock that's counting down for me to be able to deliver.
And I would say most found one, if you're successfully running a fundraising process, you are going to be pitching to so many investors that your ability to have a full background on every single one of them and confidence in it, or you'll be pitching to groups of multiple individuals that you don't even know will show up. So leading with a story is way less damaging, even if you're in a group of experts, right? If you're pitching with a medical device company, and say you're at a medical device concert, yay,
Yeah.
full of people who invest in these. But if you start telling a story and they all know it, you actually create more of a like movie trailer, like the trailer
Mm-hmm.
before the trailer, where it's like, yeah, I know this problem. I know it exists. What are you going to do about it? And now you've actually created interest to see to your next slide. Even if you just put a big data point there that they
Mm-hmm.
totally agreed with and said, oh, okay, let's go. But I think it doesn't harm you to have it. And it probably hurts you way more not to have it, especially if you don't know the full backgrounds of who you're pitching.
100%. Absolutely. I see it over and over. All right. So when I am working with someone to help them to build their pitch, I say that there's 4 questions that you must answer in every pitch that you give to have any hope at hearing a yes, even if that yes is just for a follow-on meeting. I also have this in my book that I've written. I include all of this here, and I will give a free copy of the book to anybody that gives me their physical address for me to mail it to. You can just write me on LinkedIn. I just reposted my LinkedIn into the chat. I sent out probably over 100 of these now since I have them. So just give me your address and I'll send it. But here are the 4 questions. One, like, what is it? What is your product? What is the business that you're actually pitching? Two, why would somebody buy it? So essentially, what is the unique value that you are offering? That unique value almost always is going to be pain relief. You're relieving some pain that people have. People pay to relieve pains, not to solve problems. Both of those can be easily, quickly, and clearly answered in even a 30-second story right at the beginning. And then that sets you up to answer the next question. How are you going to be able to take this to scale? How is this going to be a massive business? And then finally, all throughout the pitch, you're answering the question, why are you the one to do it? Why are you the person to be able to grow this business? And we can use story to help us to answer all of those. But the place I'm going to focus today is the most important 30 seconds when you are opening it up. Start your pitch with a story. But the question is, which one? What I see often is founders will come and they start pitching, and it's as if they've just dumped a big box of puzzle pieces on top of the table in front of investors. And these investors are smart people, right? They could spend the time looking at each of these puzzle pieces and figuring out how are these going to go together to create something. But it'd be so much easier for them if you showed them what's on the cover of the box. Oh, this is a sailboat rather than a garden. And now they know, oh, the blue piece is probably going to be the sky. The dark blue piece is going to be the water. And you've given them the frame that they need to take all the rest of your puzzle pieces and put them in the right place. Often I'll be helping out on a pitch competition or working with a founder, and they start out and they give me their opening slide. Maybe they start talking about their team, maybe they start talking about something else, and they're just giving me these pieces hoping that I will hold on to them until we get to, like, what are they actually doing? What is the business? And then I'll remember those pieces and I'll be able to put them back in to the right place. It is so much more effective if we start out by saying, here is what we are doing. And the way that you do that is with a story. Now I say this, and then founders are like, all right, I'm in. I'm going to tell a story. And then they go and they tell the first story. And the story is, meet John. John's got a problem. Well, look, we all know there is no John. You just made up John. We all know it. Everybody knows it. He's not a real person. And even a tiny bit of scratching at John, he crumbles into dust. This is worse than not telling a story at all. Because now what you've signaled is you're about to tell me that there's a massive market for this, but you could not find a single person that you could tell a story about who actually has this problem. You had to make up John to fill in the space here. So don't do that. Don't meet John. Slightly better, but not much, is this have you ever question. I would love to hear your experience on this as well in a second, Ryan. But people do these like, have you ever? I have never seen it work out well. I have never seen a person ask a question directly to their pitch audience and not have one of a few things happen. Like, one is people are like, oh, do they really want me to answer this question? Or two, and what is even worse, is the founders presenting a problem that they have a lot of experience in, something they've experienced themselves, and they ask the group of investors, have you ever had a hard time hailing a cab? Like, no, I don't take cabs. I take Uber all the time, or I drive my car. So they say no right away to the thing that you're pitching. Like, that's not good for you, because right away you've turned off their brain to the thing that you're offering. And then the last thing I'll say before I check with Ryan on his experience is that when you ask this type of have you ever question, you're driving your audience back into their fact mind. And you want them in their story mind, where they are receiving what you are giving them, and then later they will make the decision about it rather than critically evaluating everything that's on the path. Ryan, have you ever seen a question work out well in a pitch?
You just did it. You just did it to me.
That's funny.
No, well, so my background's really interesting. It's like a lot of common problems that people say everybody identifies with are a lot of problems that most people building or investing in companies actually don't identify with. They're talking about this global, like this B2C audience of like the C. The C is the consumer. Like, they're not you and I. We're not consumers. We're the builders and the investors. So like it just doesn't translate. Or like you said, I've already thought of a solution for this. I think a lot of times when you say, have you ever had this problem? You're almost implying you're not smart enough to figure out solutions to your own problems with what exists in the given market. And I'm here to save you. When it's like, yeah, have I ever had a problem choosing something to watch on TV at night? Right. There's tons of algorithms and things like that. And sometimes I like to just scroll through
Mm-hmm.
Netflix rather than actually watch and commit to anything. Have you ever a problem, hailing a cab? Have you ever a problem finding a good hotel? It's like, not really, because there's solutions for these. So I
Mm-hmm.
use it, and I don't identify it as me having a problem that needs somebody else's solution. I just identify it as either me not spending enough time, or honestly, the more common thing is not caring enough to consider an actual problem. Which that's usually the biggest signal to me when I see founders do that is they have figured out a business that they want to build around a problem space that not a lot of people actually care about, but they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it into a problem that's a lot bigger than it is, especially if they're pitching like angels and things that are looking after growth.
Yeah. So the the fourth question I had there is why are you the person to do this? And when you ask that type of question that just like lands flat, and I've never seen one work, you have sent this signal that I'm not very good at understanding people, right? That I think of this in a way that most people don't. That does not ever work in your favor. Whereas if you tell one of these other stories we're about to talk about, is going to be much more effective because now you talk about exactly the type of person who does have not only this problem but the pain that this problem causes and why they would pay to relieve it. But let's go take a look into the chat real quick. We've got, do you recommend check questions at all in pitches? I do not. I do not. I'm not going to recommend asking the audience anything. I've got 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, this is my chance to have that time and to present it. When you do ask a question, you have given up control of your 5 minutes. Either somebody is going to stare at you like, oh, do you really want me to answer that? Or God forbid they actually answer it. And now they go into this detailed answer. They spent 30 to 45 seconds of my 5 minutes giving an answer that may or may not align with the message and the story that I'm trying to convey. And I've given that up and I'm never, ever able to get that back. So I'm not going to ask questions there. When you get the follow-on meeting, now there's plenty of time to like have a conversation, and you have this in a less structured and more conversational environment. I don't know if you have anything different you would say there, Ryan.
I'm just going to bump it up to another cardinal sin. Don't ask questions. Don't tell jokes.
Oh yeah.
Because the same thing, a joke gives up control to for other people to laugh, and you're in an environment where people are either in their fact or story brain. Especially even opening with a joke is one of the most dead ways to start a pitch I've ever seen because it almost always lands with, eh. And then you have to laugh at your own joke, and you just wasted 10 seconds of your
Yes.
time. And yeah, everybody's just all the air has been sucked out of the room.
Yeah, it's not good. The other one here, Prasan is asking, could this have you ever be more of a pitch to customers then? Honestly, no, I would not do that. Instead, I would tell a story about a person who has the same pain as the customer that I'm speaking to and talk about how my thing relieved that pain. Because now I want them in their story mind. I don't want them in their fact based mind, critically evaluating everything that I say. I want to suspend their judgment for 30 seconds. Maybe in a customer pitch, I can do that for maybe 3 minutes or so. And then they'll have the information, all the information they need to be able to make that decision. Prasanna follows up with obviously the investors are much smarter and aware of solutions, but I don't think so, right? Because you're creating something that is should be genuinely unique. You're taking some unique approach. Maybe you're approaching a market in a unique way. Maybe you have a unique way of delivering. Maybe you've figured out a way of producing this product at a much lower cost, and now you can disrupt that market. I would not assume that investors are aware of certainly not aware of the solution that I'm presenting, and probably not aware even of my competitors. If you're talking about like a hamburger restaurant, then maybe that could be an exception to it. But anything that is a little bit more specific, I would not assume that they are aware of those things. All right, so I told you the stories not to tell. Don't tell them, meet John. Don't ask the questions. What are the stories to tell? So one of them is the founder story. This story is about you and what brought you to this problem. What brought you or what created such a passion in you that you were willing to spend your money, your time, your attention, maybe your relationship, certainly your opportunity cost, and invest all of that into this thing rather than something else? One of the things that investors need to guard against is you quitting too soon. Sometimes it's absolutely the right decision to end the startup because it's not going to work. But nobody wants you to quit before you have reached that place. This is your chance to tell a story that communicates why you are so invested in this problem that you were very unlikely to give up before you've exhausted every possible way that you can make this successful. Now, there's a caveat here. This is not the perfect story to tell because if you, well, one, you are not your customer. I know a lot of people, a lot of founders say, well, I'm building this exactly for people like me. But most people who face this problem do not then go and build a business to solve it. They say, oh, well, and they skip over it, or they find some other solution, or they just learn to live with what's happening. You are not your customer, no matter how much maybe you at one point were. So if the story you tell is about you, maybe in your personal capacity, we heard a pitch recently for is for a like a cybersecurity type of a thing, and the story that the founder told in the beginning was about how he had been a victim of a cybersecurity crime. But his product was not designed for individual victims. It was designed for enterprise level. So that story about his own experience doesn't communicate to why an enterprise, like a giant bank, would want to pay for the same type of service. So you have this like misalignment right from the very beginning. So these need to be told in a way that conveys your passion for the thing that you are building rather than why you would buy this particular thing. And Ryan, I see that you're off mute as well. What are you thinking?
Yeah, one last thing I would add that it indicates, and this is a bit nuanced, but once you see a number of these, once you've invested in a number of founders who you later on, I figure out a particular type is somebody who is so obsessed with their own problem that they want to build a solution and a company around it, are usually the least coachable founders because they have a unshakable vision about what XYZ should be, right? I'm building a game. I'm building the game that I've always wanted to exist by gamers, by me, for gamers. And it's like, oh, you are going to build features no one cares about. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to listen to your customers. You're not going to do customer development. You're not going to realize that the entire system that makes total sense to you, nobody cares about. And therefore, you're not going to get customers. You might love what you built, but you could probably spend several million dollars in 6 years building it so that no one purchases it.
100%. And that's why I only recommend that founders lead with their founder story if they don't have the next story I'm about to tell you about, which is a real customer success story. And in fact, my guidance to them is as soon as possible, get a customer success story. And this is where we go back to the countdown program. Let's go back and find out what is the easiest possible customer segment that we can sell into, and let's get the solution into their hands so I can tell a story about them. You'll see a lot of advice where you shouldn't work for free or provide your product for free. Well, I would say you should not provide your work product and not get any value back from it. But the value you get from a customer who actually achieved the transformation that you're helping them to create, about someone who actually had the pain that you can relieve and how they used your product to get that relief is incredibly valuable to you. In fact, in many cases, it is much, much more valuable to you than whatever they would have paid to be the very first person to use your product. Because the gold standard story to tell at the beginning of a pitch is this one. And it's a story of real customer success. This is where you were able to work with a real person, ideally a real person that did pay money, but somebody who had a pain, not only the problem, but that problem caused them pain. And because they had that pain, they tried all the other things on the market, none of those things worked for them. Then they discovered your solution, they used your solution, and then all the good things happened. They were better looking, they made more money, they were able to run faster, drive faster, whatever those things are that people are looking to do on the other side of that pain, they did it. And then I'll say, and there's 20 million people just like Bill who in the US have this same problem. What's the problem? And now we get deep into exactly why those current solutions aren't working and what the thing is you're actually solving. Here's my solution and how I'm solving it. This is exactly what we did for Bill, and now we're seeing this traction with other people. Like this is the story that helps investors to understand why someone, not only why they need your solution, but why they are willing to pay for it. All right. So how do you do it? I'm going to take you through exactly the process that I have used to build 1,000 stories for founders, for executives, for people speaking from stage over the past 4 years. The good news is that I say 50% of a story's effectiveness is all in the structure of the story you're telling. And this is a number I've completely made up, but it's pretty true, right? If you get the structure right, your story is going to work. This is not the time that we are telling, I would say, artful stories. We are telling clear stories. When somebody asks me what my storytelling style is, I tell them it is brutalist. I want to be so clear about the idea that I'm communicating that my audience can't miss it. And especially after you've made your pitch a few times, you will figure out, do people get it or do they not get it? If they don't get it, like, that's on you. That's something that you can adjust. But structure is the place where we, and that structure starts here. Every story is a story of change. Every story is a story of change. It's all about transformation. A great story or an effective story is not what happened, it is what changed. But here's the thing that's good for founders. Your business is also in the business of transformation. You are creating a transformation for your clients. That transformation is going to be the thing that is at the center of your story. So when I start thinking about how I'm actually going to build the story, I am thinking very precisely about this transformation from pain to relief, right? So I create what I call is the nano story. And this is just for me to keep me on track. It is from blank to blank. So it could be from struggle to success, from back pain to relief, from poor sleep to a restful night. I want to be clear about that transformation. If I'm not clear myself, then there's no chance that my audience is going to be clear there as well. And then I start looking for the story that I can tell, ideally this customer success story, where I take a customer from struggle to success or from pain to relief. Once I have that, now I can use my full story structure. And anybody who connects with me on LinkedIn, I'll share with you the my triangle that I use for my story structure. All 1,000 stories that I built have followed exactly that same structure because it is the structure that my audience can is easiest for them to interpret, easiest for them to receive. I also have a Substack where I talk through all the pieces there as well, and I'm glad to share that. But I'll tell you, here's the quick version of that structure. Every story that I tell follows the structure. Like the first words that come out of my mouth would be, people would usually call this a hook. I happen to call it a fuse. So for the story I told you about my very first client, I would say I worked with a founder who 200x his storytelling investment in 1 week after working with me. And now that's just the little piece that brings you into the story, that lets you know generally what's going to happen. I tell you it ends well. Another story that I tell when I'm teaching about storytelling is when I really learned the true power of story, I was in a dive doing 350 miles an hour and encased in ice. You know that I survived because I'm here telling you the story. But it raises just this tiny bit of dopamine in my audience's mind that says, oh, I want to hear what happened here. Not because they're necessarily interested in me, but because they're interested in themselves. And that's fine because I just need them to listen for 2 more seconds. When they listen for 2 more seconds, I'm going to go here to the before of the story that I'm telling. And this is the normal life of the person before they experience the transformation that I can create for them. So for the story I told you in the beginning, Drew was a startup founder that wasn't able to communicate in a pitch. And now we start talking about the challenges. The challenges are the things that are actually going to cause him pain. His problem was that he couldn't communicate in a pitch, but why was that bad? Well, it was bad because Drew had an idea that he believed could actually change the world, but he needed support from investors to actually be able to build this idea. But when he finished his pitch and he looked around the table, all he saw looking back at him were blank faces and people who absolutely didn't get what he was talking about. So not only did he not get their understanding, he never got the check. Right? These are the challenges that caused him the pain. And then he came to work with me. We spent an hour putting together the story that he needs so that here in the resolution, the next time that he went to go give his pitch, not only did people get it, but they also gave him the investment that he needed. He was able to take his $50 investment, turn it into $10,000. And after that, he was confident in the story that he was telling, and he knew that he could communicate this story to his audience of investors or even potential customers. And this, now the meaning, is what allowed him to continue raising money to begin building his business. It's that simple. It doesn't take more than 30 seconds to tell. It might take you 30 minutes to build. But in that 30 minutes to build, you are doing the work to really be very clear on what those pieces are that you need to communicate, and really paring down your story to just the bare bones of what you need to communicate to build the picture and frame it for the investors that you are speaking to. All right, Ryan, I want to check back in with you. So when you are listening to to a founder, they're giving their entire pitch, you get to the end, and now there's the time for questions. I have some thoughts about the types of questions that you might ask, but when you are thinking about the questions that you're going to ask a founder at the end of the pitch, have you noticed anything about sort of the questions that most often come to your mind, or the questions that you find yourself asking the most often when the pitch is over? I didn't set you up for this before, so
No, it's fine. No,
yeah,
I mean, the most common one is so, so who's your customer?
yeah,
Because that's there. It's they usually lead with market, solution, and problem, and the problem is usually um, it's usually all over the place. It's usually a problem that exists in the space, but it's not clear whose problem you're solving.
hmm,
So I think who is your customer is usually the most common question, because people will come in, B2B enterprise SaaS is broken. It's inefficient to, deploy things. Even though we have AI, it gets hung up in this process. It's like, okay, I buy that. It's like, so we've invented this amazing solution that automates it all and it uses this cool technology. Look how big this market is.
hmm,
Uh, we've talked to all these people, it'll be like a grid of logos. Like, okay, which one of those is your customer? Like,
hmm,
the biggest one I see is and I think this is catnip to founders, people who make money off the success of your business, who are already businesses, love to talk to you, because on the rare chance that you succeed, they succeed. So you go talk to a software vendor who you're like, I'll give you customers for free once my platform works out. They'll be like, I would love that. They'll
hmm,
talk to you all day. And it's like, you go talk to, your, channel partners. Like, what if I got you a bunch of people using this product, and like, you could dive into it too? Like, yeah, that'd be great. Like, look at all this validation.
hmm.
Like, yeah, who's going to buy it? It's like, oh, that person that I rarely talk to over there that I just think exists. It's the Bill, right? He's there
Yeah, Bill.
somewhere. I think that's
Hmm.
the number one. Who is the customer?
Yeah.
Um, and then the second biggest one is, and so what does it do?
Yes. So when I work with founders and they're pitching, I recommend that they really, really listen and pay attention to the first questions that they get asked at the end of their pitch, because these first questions are going to be the most authentic insight into how their pitch went. And those questions are going to fall into one of two categories. The first category is the one that you mentioned there, Ryan, about who is your customer. I call these like clarifying questions. So, what is it? What's your customer? What's your business model? And what typically happens is the founder believes that they have communicated that idea, that they have told you exactly who the customer is, but your audience never picked it up. If your audience is looking to clarify something that you think you said, that is the most clear signal that you did not say it well. And it could have been that maybe the words did come out of your mouth, but it came out of your mouth at the same time you put up this super busy slide with tiny numbers, and you've dropped off the zeros on your millions, and people are trying to interpret your slide and like, what is this thing? And they literally did not hear a word that you said because their brain is focused trying to undo the slide. People can either listen to you or they can read your slide. They cannot do both at the same time. The words that are going to be on the slides that I show are going to be the same words that are coming out of my mouth, so that they are reinforcing, because I'm jealous of your attention, and I want to put your attention in exactly the place that it needs to be for me to communicate the message that I want to send. So clarifying questions are a sign that you need to improve the way that you are communicating. The questions I do want are what I call these expanding questions, where people are saying, all right, so I see what you're doing for this market. Do you think this could also work for that market? Or I see how you're doing like this piece of it. What if you could go bigger and you could do these other pieces? I love those questions because now my audience thinks that they understand what it is I'm talking about. Now, if they're completely off base, then maybe I've got another problem and I have to steer them back in a different direction. But if they have now taken my idea and they're adding things to it and they're growing it, that is a clear sign that I have communicated what I need to communicate in a way that they can understand. So I want no clarifying questions. I want all expanding questions once we get to the end. All right, let's go back and look in the chat. So we got a question from Valeria about the fuse. So I use fuse because I don't like the idea of a hook, right? A hook sounds like I am, if I think about fishing even, right? I have tricked a fish into biting on this thing. He thought he was getting 100%, right? He thought he was going to get something good to eat, and now I've pulled him to a place he doesn't want to be, and he can't breathe, and he'll die if I keep him there. That's not how I want to treat my audience or my customers. I want to instead, I believe that I have something valuable, and this is the fireworks in this fuse analogy. My audience, however, has their attention, and I say that their attention is like a match. It burns hot and fast, and I want them to spend their attention on my stuff, so that those things can connect. And the fuse is the piece that connects their hot and fast but short attention to the power that I'm able to create. So I use this as a way to just connect those two. So I give them something that they're already interested in that leads them into the story that I'm going to tell, just long enough to get that little bit of dopamine running in their brain that makes them want to hear what I'm saying, not forces them into a place they don't want to be. Yeah,
Can I make a comment that
yeah,
might
please do.
improve your story? I've probably worked on motorcycles too much in my life,
Oh yeah.
but when I heard fuse, I was thinking of a fuse that you put into your engine,
Oh sure,
um,
yeah.
which makes a spark. Still, I get it, but a fuse to a
Yeah.
rocket makes so much more sense. So maybe a little
Yeah.
iconography there could actually
Oh,
help the.
absolutely. No, that's good. That's good, right? That's great because you came from a different perspective than what I had in mind. I said fuse there real quick. I counted on you having the right metaphor in your mind. When I'm teaching about this, I have like a firecracker with a fuse that's there, so I can guide people's attention into that. But it's a great example there. All right, let's keep in the questions. So Kevin is, if your product hasn't been built and it's big and expensive and transformational, do you always need to use the founder story? And how long should be limited to? Generally, I'm going to limit the story at the beginning of a 5-minute pitch to no more than about 45 seconds. If I go to 60 seconds, I'm also sneaking in a bunch of information in that story as well. Things like market size, things like maybe a price point, something else, some other bits of information that the investors need to understand as well inside of that. So I could tell a story, and I have worked with founders who are in pharma, or they're developing brand new products, or cutting edge technology that hasn't been built yet. But here we will often will tell a story about them and what led them to this area of research, or we'll tell a story about someone who is suffering today because they don't have the solution. So in pharma, for instance, maybe there's a new drug that's being developed. I worked with a founder just a couple of weeks ago who has this discovery that can lead to this new case of drugs that prevents neuropathy, this really painful nerve condition. And right now, all the drugs that treat it are kind of like these side uses for these other drugs, so they don't treat it very well. It's often treated with opioids that leads to addiction, but they do it because they have no other option until now. And now it leads them into why people need this and where's that space on the market for them. Roger's asking, is the program virtual? We absolutely are virtual, but because it's a relatively small group and it's mentor led, I will offer the same session multiple times. Sometimes with the current cohort, I've done just the one-on-one teaching session with founders so that they can get exactly what they need when they need it. Time is your most valuable resource, and I don't want to have you delaying or waiting on me for something, so we deliver it for you at the time that you need it. You also have one-on-one sessions that you can book with me as well. Some founders use those once a week, others use them about once a month, but we will meet you. You're not going to be suffering because the time doesn't work for you. Whenever I can get more than one person there, that works out great, but we'll make sure that you get what you need. All right, Jeff, has how do I create a problem if I'm just improving on existing social media apps? So, Jeff, you're not like if you were just improving on existing social media apps, you're not building a business that can be successful. People pay to relieve pain, not to solve problems. I got a lot of problems. My desk is over there is kind of messy. I've got a car that needs some engine work, but those are not causing me pain, so I'm not doing anything to actually try to address those. Now, in a couple hours, I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to feel the pangs of hunger, and I'm going to take action to go. It's a head gasket, actually, but I'm going to feel the pangs of hunger, and I'm going to go and relieve that pain myself. The question here for you, Jeff, is what is the pain that your customer is experiencing? What is the pain that they have because existing social media apps don't work? We've got to be very clear on that. And in the cohort, I have a whole section on customer discovery, not so you can sell, but so you can understand what the pain is that your customers have, so that later when we talk to them, or at least when you're in your pitch and you're presenting to investors, we're very clear about that pain. Pain is what causes people to eventually take action. Um, yeah, we got Paul there. Who? Yeah. Okay, that's good. All right, and check the fuses. Awesome. So to wrap up, let me share this last. I guess Prasanna's got one in there. Do investors ever get bored or disinterested? No, they don't. They don't because the investors are not saying, "Oh, I see how this story is structured." Right? What they are doing is they're receiving this information. And Ryan, please correct me if I'm wrong. You were glad to receive information in a clear way that is easy for you to understand, rather than you having to use the cognitive effort to work through it. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, and I think story here, you said it once, Dan, where this isn't poetry, this isn't
No.
abstract storytelling, this isn't James Joyce. This is, I like the brutalist method,
Mhm.
avoid the Baroque method at all cost. But it is really, it's the quickest possible way to communicate the problem you're solving, who it's for, and why you have a solution. And that, candidly, there are certain investors who just don't invest in certain spaces, and you
Mhm.
will have saved them so much time and they will respect you more. If you can, in 30 seconds, tell them that they are completely disinterested, rather than have them sit through another 4 minutes and 30 seconds, piecing apart what exactly you're doing, if they believe in your market, coming up with some other red flag, maybe asking questions that make other investors who would have been interested fleck off because, like, ooh, that's a really good question. Like, I don't know if that market's that big. I'm not an expert in that, but I really thought
Mhm.
that story made sense. I'd like to learn more. So it's really not a boredom tool. It's just it's a transmission tool. It's right. It's the truck.
Mhm.
It's not the cargo.
100%. So the last thing that I'll say about um, all right, we're back, persona. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
bore them, right? Like they are
it's
there
30
because,
seconds.
but not only that, like investors are looking for this opportunity, right? They are looking for a place where they can invest their money and have an impact with a founder that wants to have that impact. That is not boring to them. That is exactly what they're doing. If you're presenting your pitch to your community theater group who has no interest in the thing that you're doing, like it's boring to them because it doesn't relate to their experience. When you tell this story, you're not going to bore them. It's going to connect with them. All right.
Oh, I
The
got one more
last.
on that, just
Oh,
because
go, go, go.
it's very top of mind. So I was
Yeah.
at a wine dinner last night, almost full of people who could give no expletive about startup things and like
Mhm.
things like that. They're winemakers, they're producers from Spain and Europe, and there's some people who help do distribution and logistics, but they run businesses. So every time one person would ask me about like, all right, so like, what do you do? Like, what's an example? And I have the founder 30-second stories sometimes better than they do. I'd be like, oh
Mhm.
well, we're actually hearing this pitch from this one founder who they have, anybody who has this condition, they've done this thing and that's how it changes it. And people were glued. They're like, "How do you know all of this stuff?" It's like I because I've listened to other people's stories, or I've created them for them just by listening to their pitch and asking
Mhm.
a bunch of clarifying questions, and they're like, "Oh, okay." You can enrapture people with those little things because it teaches them about the world. I think one of the best use, and we give this feedback a lot in our pitch practice sessions, is it is your opportunity to educate if your investor has no idea what world you swim in or the water that you swim
Mhm.
in a way that an educated sixth grader can understand. People love to learn more about the world. So if you introduce them to a completely different industry through a 30-second story and they're like, huh, so that's how that works. That's a huge lever to have them keep listening to.
It is so good. And in fact, you said exactly the thing that I was about to say is that when you do tell a story, it's easier for people to remember. They remember it, and then those investors go and they share it with someone else. Maybe they're not the right investor for you, but they talk to other people. They hear these other things and they make these connections for you because they can transmit your story that you told them. People remember stories more than they remember facts. All right. So in the chat, there's my LinkedIn one last time. If you connect with me on LinkedIn and you give me your physical address, I'll send you your book. If you want to spend some time going through your pitch, then all you've got to do is I'll send you the link once we are in LinkedIn. I'll do 30 minutes with you, and I'll give you my feedback on your pitch. I'll help you to shape up the story that you need there. If you are interested in the Gust cohort that is kicking off next month, then there's the link that Ryan just put there. This is it's high value. It is $1,500. At the end, you have the pitch that you can feel confident delivering. And I'll tell you, if you don't get to that place, I'll give you your money back. There is literally zero risk. Either you get a pitch that you're confident delivering, or you get some time with me to shape it up and figure out what you don't want to do. Thanks so much for
And
your
it's
time.
a
Yep.
it's a dedicated, right? It's 3 to 6 months, same as the other one, right? This is
Yeah, yeah.
not
So,
like a flash
oh,
in the pan kind of
oh
program.
no, absolutely no. It's until we get to the end. If we can deliver the pitch that you're confident delivering, in I would aim for a month, right? A month for us to go through, and we're working back and forth. I've got the different worksheets, and we're going through, we're testing. We're also working with other people who haven't heard your pitch, so that you can get good feedback from people who are already in the investor space, and you could be confident delivering it. If it takes you 3 months to do it, like, I'm still here with you. Awesome. Thanks so much. Hope to see you soon. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you, Dan.
Looking forward to hearing your stories. We'll see you.